again, feral friends and fellow nature nerds. Thanks for tuning in to this Dirt Dispatch number 22. I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara. Now, if you haven't tuned in to Dirt Dispatches before, Dirt Dispatches is just my bi-weekly, bi-monthly, every other Wednesday I put out a Dirt Dispatch. And it's kind of a diary. It's just my thoughts, maybe my rants, maybe things that I've seen or things that I've done that are nature related in the last couple of weeks. So that's what this is. So thanks again for tuning in. So one of the things I saw the last couple of weeks, actually 2 weekends ago, was a bald eagle, which is not unusual for this area. There was a pair that were hanging around our lakes here near the house in the fall. But it is kind of unusual to see them at this time of year. So we have two small lakes here on the base that I live on and not far from the house. And they tend to freeze over in the winter. And bald eagles are partially migratory. A little over half of their diet is fish. So what they'll do is they'll migrate just far enough south to find open water. Now, our lakes did have a little bit of open water, but not really enough for an eagle to fish on. It was just a small spot, and it was pretty much surrounded by Canada geese. I need to get that right. So it was a little bit surprising to see it just because of the time of year it is. I was a little bit afraid for it because it swooped down across the road. It was getting mobbed by crows, and I was worried that it was going to get hit by a car. But luckily, the car coming the opposite direction of me was also paying attention and watching the eagle. So it stayed safe, which was good. I hate to see any animal get road killed. I think it's a senseless way for a wild animal to die. I do salvage for my in-person programs. So if I do find interesting roadkill and it's intact enough, I can process it and I can use parts of it to educate people. An eagle is not one of those things. I do have a migratory bird salvage permit through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So a lot of bird stuff I can use, but eagles are not included in that. Eagles are protected, and you need extra special permission in order to do anything with that. So I was extra glad to see it stay safe. The other thing I've done recently is my kids and I participated in Moose Day. And what Moose Day is it's a survey of moose in the Laramie Medicine Bow National Forest region. Now, it's on a weekend. It's a Saturday and or a Sunday. I actually went out both days because both my kids wanted to participate, and they're teenagers, so of course they couldn't go together. That would be terrible. So I went out both days, which is a lot of fun. And what it is you adopt a specific route. They give you a route, and you go out there on one or both days, and you look for moose, and you're looking for signs of moose, tracks, scat, actual physical moose, as well as other large mammals and large predators. So these routes are not terribly easy. We have a lot of snow up there in the mountains, and you're not following a trail. You're kind of bushwhacking along these creek beds where, which is good moose habitat. You're looking in those areas where moose might be found. And, moose don't always follow the trails. But what's interesting about moose in this area is they're not a native species. Moose are not native to this area of southern Wyoming. There's no archaeological record of moose in Wyoming until the mid to late 1800s. And the moose that we have now here in southern Wyoming were actually introduced into northern Colorado in the 1980s by wildlife managers down there. And they wanted to have them here or in that area for wildlife viewing and for hunting and that sort of thing. It's good habitat for moose. So they introduced them into northern Colorado, and eventually they moved up into this area of southern Wyoming. And we have about 300 here in southern Wyoming, and that population has been relatively stable. So in other areas in western Wyoming and in other parts of the world, moose populations are declining. And a lot of that is a result of habitat loss, of climate change and things like that. But the moose here in southern Wyoming are doing pretty well. And they think that's because they're a younger population. But the fact that they're introduced, that they're not native to this area, brought up the question from my oldest child, does that mean they're invasive? And not by my definition. So when I think of an invasive species, it's one that's not only not native, but it's actually destructive to that ecosystem. It pushes out native species and it reduces biodiversity. And these moose don't do that. This is good habitat for them. So even though they're not native, they're not doing any harm in that environment. Now, we didn't see any moose or signs of moose, as a matter of fact, on either day that I went out with either of my children. But, that's science. It's just as important to know where the moose are as to know where they're not. So we did see on the second day, on Sunday, my youngest child and I did see some coyote tracks in the snow, which was really cool, but also some bobcat tracks, which was extra cool. Now, we didn't see the animal itself, unfortunately. I would have liked to have at least caught a glimpse of it. We gave it the old pss, 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 and it still didn't want to come out and see us. So, but we did see those tracks, so we knew it was there. So if you get a chance to participate in any community science, I highly encourage you to do that. It's wonderful. It's very rewarding. And without community science people like myself and my kids and all the other people that we saw out there this weekend, this kind of stuff wouldn't be possible. So the University of Wyoming wouldn't be able to survey moose if people didn't adopt these routes and get out there and do the surveys. So that's all I have for you this week. If you want to support the podcast, you can do that by becoming a patron. Find out all the information by going to patreon.com/dispatches from the forest. Welcome to my newest patron, Todd Sauls. Thanks for becoming a patron and supporting the podcast. You can also make a one-time donation via PayPal, and you can send me an email if you want using the email address dispatchesfromtheforest@gmail.com, or you can make a one-time donation on the Cash App using the hashtag ForestNerd. Finally, you can go get yourself some Dispatches from the Forest merch at cafepress.com/shop/Dispatches from the Forest. Click on products. You'll see all the things that there are there to offer. You can also follow Dispatches from the Forest on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Go check out the Coyote Myths and Misconceptions webinar on the YouTube channel. Only thing left to say is I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara, reminding you to go outside and get dirty. Dirt Dispatches is a production of Dispatches from the Forest and may not be used or rebroadcast whole or in part without express written permission.